Hello, Bears fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Bears on Tap. We've got a full barn today. I am Ron Luce. I am joined by Q and Juice. Gentlemen, a week away, boys. The draft is almost here. How are you guys doing on this beautiful Thursday afternoon?
I wish I had 3 more weeks. I think I'm alone in that opinion, like completely alone, outside of maybe some other poor schlub who's as behind as I am. But in all honesty, I'm excited for it to be here. I'm excited to stop wondering what could be and see what will be.
Well put. Juice, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. I echo that sentiment. I think I'm done reading a bunch of crap. That's all over, and just excited to see who they end up with. I think that it ends up being just so much information, so much what if that you kind of psych yourself out of a million different ways that this thing's going to go. But yeah, no, I'm excited to finally just have some closure. I get like the spring training feel, Ron, and you know how I feel about spring training.
I do.
I'm just ready for it to be over. I'm just too much over. I get sensory overload on draft, and I'm like, all right, I just want to get this over with and see who they have, and have the closure of, all right, the Bears got this guy, let's move forward. So yeah, I echo that. I'm ready for it to be over.
Yeah, I feel like. Go ahead, Q.
Can you imagine being like a GM or a scout with all the information and trying to make a decision? We have like half the information.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And two, to be in those meetings and obviously they build some relationships with some of these guys over the course of this process, and getting them, not getting them, they go before you, you're unable to close it, or you decide over a guy over the next. It's just an array of emotions, I think, that we don't really talk about even. Going through this process is not easy. It's these guys' livelihoods. You got where they're going on the line, and where they get drafted dictates, pay base and things like that. And when you're messing with somebody's lives too, I think it's just nice to have an idea. I'm sure these guys too who are about to get drafted next week are I just want to know where I'm going at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna say there's so much that goes into the draft process, right? You start with the combine, obviously, in February, and then these guys are doing their pro days, they're taking visits, they're going all over the place. I'm sure it just in their minds, it gets to a point where you, like you said, Juice, all right, where am I going? Where's my career getting started? And who am I working to essentially kind of, gel with in terms of the rest of the roster, learning a playbook, etc. So yeah, man, it's gonna be fun. The anticipation of it's fun, and the speculation part of it's fun. But agreed, you do get to a point where you're like, all right, I've done enough speculating. Now I'm just ready to ride the roller coaster that is the draft, because it really is. It's like an amusement park ride, especially night one. And just getting ready for that and geared up for it is, I feel like, half the fun. So very, very excited. Just like you guys said, there's a lot of speculation still going around that has kind of come out of the woodwork. We've got Scott here in the comments saying, let's effing go, and that the Bears are going to trade back up. That would be absolutely wild if that were to happen. Talk about a roller coaster ride in itself. But gentlemen, I think we wanted to focus for the topic of today's show around some rumors regarding a certain position player that, everybody's kind of talking about now all of a sudden. Do the Bears not pass on this guy if he's there? And that's Texas running back Bijan Robinson. He's been really hot in the media the last few days, especially in the world of Chicago Bears football. So just from the top rope here, guys, let's dive into it. What do you guys think about the idea of Bijan and the Bears?
I mean, Bijan he's a hell of a running back, and he's a player that just about any team could use. Any team can get a lot of value of. But the issue is the second half of my statement. Not hell of, but running back. It's a deep running back class. You got guys like Devon Achane and Zach Charbonnet, and guys a little lower down on the board that can really provide a lot of value for you and are a lot cheaper draft capital wise. Now, they're not Bijan. Bijan's really good, but I don't know. If they took Bijan at 9, I'd be very underwhelmed by that personally, just because I think this team has so many more needs. I'm not sure a running back is going to make that big a difference to what the team does this year. And a running back is a win now move. It's for this year and the next like 2 years, 3. And the next thing you know, after that, you got to pay him like he was a top 10 pick, because he was.
Right.
And those top 10 pick running backs who do what they're supposed to do tend to be pretty expensive. And I'm just not sure that's where you want your cap allocated. The running back picks it comes down to the long-term strategy for me. And it just doesn't tend to line up very well unless you've got Pat Mahomes and you're drafting Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That made sense. This, I'd be concerned with this pick. It would be fun. I mean, Bijan and Justin Fields running out like that offense would be fun without a doubt. I just think they can make it fun without spending that type of draft capital at the position.
I like it. Agreed. Juice, your first initial takes on this as well, buddy.
Yeah, when you play Madden, you got those two guys next to it. It's fun, right? At that mesh point when you're running RPOs, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, Q, you hit the nail right on the head, man. Like, there's so many holes on this that you said it. This is a move you make like if you're like Philadelphia and you were so close to winning the Super Bowl, and you need like, that next just difference maker on offense that can get you over the hump. The Bears need so much that in some crazy way, some of it makes sense. But then again, you win in the trenches. And I think that in a lot of ways, that pick at 9 just doesn't make sense. There's going to be a mess of players, if not, corners or defensive linemen or offensive linemen that are going to be available at that pick that I think are going to serve Justin Fields' development maybe a little bit more down this next year, because we've been talking about keeping him upright. And the other thing is like I know that they didn't sign like a wowing running back in free agency, but they invested a lot of capital in that already over the course of the offseason. Yeah. I don't see it. Like, why would you bring in a guy like Foreman and then, pick that guy at 9? Like, Bijan's an every down running back, and then you still have Khalil Herbert on the roster. Those are things that, like, it just doesn't make sense at 9. If they were to trade down and get another pick, maybe, and then you're picking maybe like in the teens again, or at 30 and in the teens, maybe. But even then, like, there's just so much to fill that, like Q said, like, this is just not a move that you make now. It's one of those that you make, maybe next year when you have 2 first-round picks and you have extra money to spend, and there's one guy next year that's a difference maker to get you over that hump after seeing Justin Fields take another leap. I think it's just not the time for it. But you got to start to wonder, like, is this part of Poles' plan to like just drive up, some assets to like trade up, or to muddy the waters more, that maybe there's a trade lurking to be, to trade down later and have another second round pick that, maybe they can pull out of this. Or it could very well be a tactic that, they're sending, some of this information out there so that it does drive the price on some of this moving up stuff for teams that are interested in Bijan in the teens. Now they're kind of announcing, well, we may take him. This is the price. If you got to come up, you're going to have to come up and get him. Just to muddy the waters makes a little sense. And we know that Ryan Poles likes to play some games sometimes.
Yeah, he sure does. And I'm in agreement with, I think, both of you here in the sense of the running back position. You look at the last 10 years of the NFL draft, and running backs that do go very high in the first round, it's been a little bit of a crapshoot too in a lot of ways. I think, Q, you mentioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire, been a very underwhelming first round pick as a running back, I think, for a lot of people there in Kansas City. This past season got outplayed by Isaiah Pacheco, who was a 7th round draft choice last year. That's certainly something this team is considering. And then just to your point as well, right? Investing the capital they did in the running back position, albeit not a ton of draft capital. They only invested about $4.5 million at the position, Foreman about 3 of that, and then Travis Homer getting the rest of it. But to your point, Khalil Herbert still on the roster as well. You have 3 very capable running backs now in that backfield, and they probably still might go running back, but probably later in the draft. And a guy that I personally have done a lot of film watching on over the last week and a half, and Q, since the last time you and I talked, is Spears from Tulane. I think he's a very intriguing prospect as well at the running back position that is going to be there later on and is starting to garnish a lot of attention as maybe the next best running back in this class behind Bijan. So I think there's too many good running backs in this draft, in my opinion, for Poles to go out there. To your guys' point, that's a win now move. But furthering on your point here, Juice, about muddying the waters a little bit, this feels like the perfect time to muddy the waters on a player like Bijan Robinson because you have the Eagles sitting at 10. And that is a very win now move that the Eagles could absolutely do. You lose Miles Sanders in free agency to Carolina. You really are effectively down to 2 running backs right now in Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott. That feels like the perfect move, bringing in Bijan, coupling him in with Hurts and Goddard and Smith and Brown on the outside. And all of a sudden, that Eagles offense is even more complete, arguably, than it was last year, because I think Bijan's a better running back than Miles Sanders is. So maybe this is Poles' tactic of saying, look, guys, the Eagles are at 10. We like Bijan, and maybe we will take him. But if you want him, you got to come up and get 9. And we'll move back with you so you can go get that win now piece to complete your offense and potentially steal a guy away from somebody like the Philadelphia Eagles, because we've already heard rumors too over the last 6 days or so that the Bears and Steelers have had conversations about the number 9 pick if Jalen Carter were to slip to that pick. So there's already a lot of noise surrounding the number 9 pick, I think, leading up to the draft. And it very well might just be Ryan Poles trying to drive up the value a little bit on that selection so they can move back yet again and collect on assets, because Q, you and I talked about it ad nauseum over the last handful of shows. And Juice, you and I even touched on it on our last show. This draft is so deep, especially in that 20 to 40 range. I feel like Poles is trying to get maybe 2 picks in that range somehow, some way. And maybe he moves back twice in the first round. How crazy would that be? That would feel like Kevin Costner's pulling all the switches on the draft boards on draft day, because, you know, he's got so much ammunition to move around because they have so many things they need. And you could tell he's the kind of guy that you saw it last year. He turned 2 day 3 picks into like 5. He could absolutely do that again, but now he's got night 1 capital to potentially do it with.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, I think so. We've heard Poles say they have 7 to 8 blue players, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the guys who they feel really comfortable with being able to come in day 1 and contribute and continue to contribute throughout their career. So trying to think that through here. I mean, I just put this on, pulled my board up and was just looking through and trying to mark, like, Will Anderson and Jalen Carter are clear ones, right? Those 100%. Are day 1 contributors. I put Christian Gonzalez up there because if you've watched his film, you see just how buttery smooth that guy is. It's insane for his size. And Tyree Wilson, I'm going to assume, is in there just because of his insane physical profile. I don't know how he's not a day 1 contributor. And then that's where stuff gets a little choppier. Like, you can throw Devon Witherspoon in there. He had some penalty issues at Illinois. He's probably not quite the prospect Christian Gonzalez is. So I'm not confident that he's a blue guy for them. Same with Stroud. I'm not confident in. I think JSN ends up being a blue player for them because he is just a easy fit into a slot receiver role that should be. Like, I think he's a pretty clear day 1 contributor. Bijan, probably a blue player. Again, very clear day 1 contributor who's there. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to get even more choppy. Like Paris Johnson Jr., great prospect. I'll shout that from the mountaintops, but he needs development. Mm-hmm. Probably not a blue guy. Miles Murphy might be in there. His production has always been kind of iffy, but I think he kind of falls in with Tyree Wilson, where, like, I don't know how he isn't at least a little productive in the NFL, but I'm holding him off for now. The next 2 guys I see that are blue are Darnell Wright and Peter Skoronski, where Skoronski's blue at guard, I would assume.
Sure.
And Darnell Wright, I think, is a clear day one contributor at right tackle. So I think you're right. I think you're really onto something about the trade down, because I think they're trying to get Darnell Wright or JSN on that trade down, because those are the two blue players that you're looking at here that you can probably have somewhere up around the 15 spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that Steelers trade makes a lot of sense, because I think it's right now the Steelers have 16. So moves you right into that range, right, where you can absolutely scoop one of those two guys, and they come in and they start on day one. I'm with you there on Darnell Wright. I really like Darnell Wright. He's so buttery smooth at right tackle. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And JSN does make a lot of sense. I mean, this offense looks insane if you think about it from like a spread concept. Shit, you could run 5 receivers on the field at any given point in time and feel fine about it with, JSN plus the big 3 right now in Cole Kmet. And then all of a sudden you still have that running option in Fields. If, it's so spread out and thin, you can get him out in a little more space and let him use his legs a little bit. So many options. Again, see, you're getting me excited again. This is the speculation part. I think the speculation of reading and doing that part of the draft analysis is what bores a lot of people. But when you're sitting here and chopping it up with your buddies, or in our case, chopping it up here on the podcast, like, this is when you get excited again, because you're like, oh, they can move here and they can move here. It's like a big game of chess, right? Like you're watching Ryan Poles sit there and just stroke his scruff as he's watching the chessboard, and he's seeing who moves where, and he's like, I could go here, I could do this. I really want to hype him up to think he can get this, but then I'm going to do this. Like, it's just a big game of chess. It really is. And I mean, right now, guys, like, if you had to pick, just, I don't want to use the word on here. I don't know if we'll get flagged by YouTube, but, somebody's threatening you. You have to make a decision. Like, who's the team that you think is going to get desperate enough to come up to 9? Because I don't have a concrete opinion on it, but I would love to hear what you guys think too. Because to me, there's like probably 3 or 4 teams that I can make the argument for that can get desperate enough to come up to 9 and just, I don't want to use the term do something silly, but really feel the pressure of like, oh, we got to move up and we got to pull something off. Otherwise we're SOL.
Realistically, like, I'm not going to include Minnesota in this, because I think they're going to have to pay a king's ransom to trade in division from 23 up to 9. I just don't think that's a realistic option, unless Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is just throwing analytics out the window and his whole thing's analytics, so it doesn't really make sense. But to me, I'm throwing the Jets out because I think the Aaron Rodgers stuff is more or less done. If it wasn't, I think the Jets would be right at the top of the list, especially if you're talking like a Will Levis still sitting on the board. But ultimately, I'm coming down to Houston and Tennessee. I think those are the two that you're really targeting. Pittsburgh tends to win most trades, so desperation is not really a word that they believe in. So I ultimately don't think they're going to throw a ton at getting a player there. And if I'm being completely honest, if the Bears trade away number 9 overall with Jalen Carter on the board, I might riot. But ultimately, I see Houston, especially if these rumblings about them passing on a QB at 2, if Bryce Young is off the board, are real, because they might be trying to go get a Will Levis there, whatever quarterback is still there. And Tennessee, I just think Tennessee's pretty desperate in general. Like, I think there's a real chance you could see Tennessee moving up to like 3. But if they can't, then maybe 9 becomes a viable option.
I like it. Juice, does any team just scream out at you that they're going to come up for 9 that isn't Houston or Tennessee?
I don't think like screaming, but it's kind of interesting how there is so much smoke with the Pittsburgh Steelers stuff. Like, it seems like in a lot of ways it kind of mirrors how the Carolina Panthers stuff was, prior when they traded the number 1 pick too. There is a lot of information that was still out there, and it's just interesting to see that they would be, and obviously this is all indicative on if their guy is there at 9 too, right? They're probably, a lot of these deals aren't being made until the draft board starts to, unfold a little bit. And then there'll be a lot of GMs who are on the phone probably with the Bears at 9. But Q, you brought up an interesting point. Like, what if one of these quarterbacks fall? What if at 9 the Bears are sitting there and they're able to get, a couple picks because of Will Levis falls? It's interesting to see, and there are a decent amount of teams that are in the teens that have quarterback issues and have, unstable quarterback plans for the future. I think the interesting thing for like the Bears is in a lot of ways it's win-win. If one of those quarterbacks seems to fall, they're going to have a trade partner that way. If not, and all 4 of those guys that we think we're going to go, it essentially makes the Bears like the 5th pick in the draft because they're obviously not picking a quarterback. Mm-hmm. So in terms of position players, 9 is an interesting spot for them to be. It's all about making sure that, we view this as a top 5 pick opposed to 9 because we're not picking a quarterback. So it's interesting to see, how all this draft board is going to play. But initially, as I read the rumors here, there's a lot of smoke for Pittsburgh, and that's what worries me too, Q, because you said it, like they do not lose trades very often. And if essentially a rookie GM, let's face it, this is Ryan Poles' first pick in the first round draft. In the first round of the draft. Let's look at it as master against novice here and pray to God that they're not getting, just taken for a ride at that point. It'd be interesting to see, which teams are in the these are the times where I wish I had just access for 5 minutes to Ryan Poles' phone. I just want to see like what has been exchanged, who's been the likely callers, because I think there's and I've come like full circle. I thought they were picking somebody at 9, and as we've gotten closer to the draft, I've gotten more and more confident that I think they're trading out of that pick. There's just so much talk and the cap news about how they would prefer to do that, and you kind of go over like those blue chip prospects, and if they're able to grab another pick and get one of those guys that they like, then I think for their sake, with so many holes, they have to do it, because it's just there's so much of this roster needs to be just turned over that it's just interesting to see like at 9 they could do that in one fell swoop by identifying the team and making sure that they end up with a pick between 20 and 40 again.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but one team that I can't help but think might be in the market, especially if one of these quarterbacks fall. And I honestly, I'll be completely frank with you guys. If teams like Tennessee aren't, and especially if Houston passes on a quarterback at 2, realistically, are only 2 quarterbacks going in the top 5? Probably, right? I mean, the Colts probably take a quarterback. I feel hard-pressed to think they don't. So if Tennessee doesn't come up and get 3, maybe only 2 quarterbacks go in the first 5 picks. Now all of a sudden, because Atlanta's not taking a quarterback, they seem to be very sold on Ritter. The Raiders, I guess, could go quarterback, but they've got Jimmy G for 2 years. Now all of a sudden, if I'm the Bears, I mean, Detroit's not probably taking a quarterback, right? Like 9 looks really crazy all of a sudden. And this is where I'm intrigued to hear what you guys think. What about a team like Tampa, who's sitting at 19, who has no quarterback because Brady is retired? Yes, they signed Baker Mayfield, but we don't know what he's going to bring, right? You have Kyle Trask, who you took in the second round a couple years ago, but he's kind of an unknown commodity to everybody outside of that organization. Does Tampa move up if Anthony Richardson is there at number 9, where you can groom him behind a Baker Mayfield for a year or 2? Or a Will Levis if they fall in love with his big arm? What do you guys think? Like, Tampa to me just feels like a team that could realistically slide up and try and sneak a quarterback.
I could see maybe a Will Levis, but then my thought there becomes, why would they move all the way up to 9 for him when Anthony Richardson's probably the hotter commodity? Which maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe they are worried about someone taking Levis there. But ultimately, I I think that Levis would be their guy because when I see Anthony Richardson, the type of regime that I see falling in love with him are the Arthur Smiths, the Kyle Shanahans, the offensive geniuses who just need a guy to push the buttons that they tell them to push because their run scheme is so insanely good that they just need a quarterback who can do enough and be a threat with his legs. Like those are the coaches that I see falling in love with them, and I'm not sure that's what Tampa Bay does. I think Tampa Bay wants more of the pure pocket passer type, which Levis isn't really either, but Levis has the tools to be and has like that's the upside in him, right? Is being more of that pocket passer, while Richardson is just the more freakish athletic upside, who, if I'm being completely frank, I see the two prospects in very similar lights. One's just a lot faster. But so I hesitate to see Tampa moving up that far for Levis, just because I think Richardson will be ahead of him on most teams' boards. But it's possible. I mean, they got nothing at quarterback. They got a salary cap that's juiced to the limit and are hoping to win now, desperate on a Baker Mayfield, like you said. But yeah, ultimately, I'm not sure about that.
And do you guys think, obviously Tampa was technically a playoff team, albeit they got bounced in the first round as they should have as a below 500 team. But do you guys see any of the playoff teams? I know we've kind of axed out Minnesota because of the in-division trading, but like, does a Dallas get desperate enough to try and move up from 26? Does a Baltimore get desperate enough to move up from 22? What about the Chargers at 21? Like, I'm so intrigued because we saw a team like Kansas City do that the year they went up and got Mahomes. And obviously, hindsight being 2020, we know what Mahomes became. So, like, it was a worthy trade for them at the time. But we've seen this. Like, it's not totally foreign for a team to come up from the 20s and the late teens and just try to get their guy that they really like in the top 10. Are we leaning probably more towards that, that Tennessee coming up from 11? Does a team like would the New England Patriots or the Washington Commanders be crazy enough to try and move up and do something? Like,
I
to
think
me,
Washington, you could be onto something with Washington and like Anthony Richardson.
Sure, right. I was gonna say, because that team feels like they might try and hype up Sam Howell, but like, come on, are we really hyping up Sam Howell?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So, and that feels like a team, especially with the sale of the team and everything like that, trying to turn the page and be fresh and bring in a new face. Like, I'm gonna go take, because I've watched this movie 15 times. I kid you not, in the last like 2 weeks. I'm gonna take a piece of draft day. Like, are they that desperate to make a move to save football in Washington? Like, you know what I mean? I'm begging for somebody to do something stupid, because ultimately a team getting desperate is exactly what Ryan Poles wants in this scenario, because he's going to get a king's ransom in return.
So when Juice was talking earlier, it just got the wheels in my brain spinning about like the Steelers, because I'm sitting here thinking like Ryan Poles ain't trading it if Jalen Carter's there. That has never made sense to me since that rumor started coming out. But as you were talking about, Juice is like, but okay, what if we just take Jalen Carter out of this rumor? We start to think through who they might be trading up, like willing to trade up for. I mean, their biggest need is offensive tackle. And there's going to be offensive tackle talent on the board right there. I mean, they've got an okay play from Chukes Okorafor and Dan Moore Jr. on their O-line, but like they just spent a first round pick on a quarterback who needs some help last year. Like, not a quarterback who can do it all himself, in my opinion. A quarterback who needs a lot of talent around him to really succeed. And they don't want to look like fools from that. Maybe they will go, and we all know they don't need receiver help. They're the Pittsburgh Steelers. But maybe they'll go up and get an offensive tackle there. Maybe, Paris Johnson Jr., that they're just in love with the kid. Or their second biggest need is cornerback. If taking the rookie quarter or the second-year quarterback aspect out of this, if a Devon Witherspoon is sitting there, maybe they want to go get him. He seems like Mike Tomlin's kind of guy.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And Juice, want to hear your thoughts again on this here too, buddy. But just really quick, like to me, agreed, right? Like the Steelers feel like a team that makes sense. You have Kenny Pickett in place. You just went out and got Allen Robinson for literally nothing. You're only paying him a third of his salary next year. And all you had to do was move back 15 spots in the 7th round to get him. And again, who's most likely to get the most out of a receiver other than the Pittsburgh Steelers? That's just what they do. You still have Pickens, who might probably take a step forward in year 2. You know, you still have Deontay Johnson there. I know he's kind of gone forgotten because he didn't score a whole lot last year, but like he's still there. You have 3 legitimate receivers, and that's a team that can scoop a receiver in the 4th round, and he's going to be good. Like that's just what they do. But to your point, keeping Kenny Pickett upright is their biggest problem. And they have some draft capital this year. They have 7 picks. They've got 2 7ths, 2 2s, one of which is Chicago's original pick, obviously, and a 3, a 4, and a 1. And that's it. Like there's no 5, there's no 6. So for them, maybe it is a little more focused of let's go get that offensive lineman that's really going to keep Kenny upright, because they went on a hot streak at the end of the year and almost snuck into the playoffs. So that feels like a team that they're 1 or 2 pieces away from maybe not winning the AFC North just because of Cincinnati and Baltimore still going to be good again, but maybe they're in it for a wild card spot. And as you continue to build this team up through the draft and you have Kenny Pickett there, maybe there's an opportunity for that. And that does start to make a lot more sense, even taking Jalen Carter out of the equation. Do you have any other thoughts you'd like to add here, buddy?
I just love how no matter what podcast we're on, there's always a movie that goes next to it, Ron. It's always either Moneyball for the Cubs side or now it's draft day and you're just dropping in a David Putney just because you feel like it. But
just because I feel like it.
But no, I mean, we talked about like them dropping all the way to 20. It'd be really interesting to see like what a typical, trade package looks like when you go from 9 to 20. That's a significant jump to go from 23 up into the top 10. It'd be interesting to see what the Bears could pull back for that. And in their case, are one of those blue players that we talked about earlier on in this show still there around 20 for them? Because I think that like when we're talking about evaluating these trades, we need to keep in mind that the Bears are probably taking that pick and then hopefully grabbing somebody that they deem is going to be a day one contributor that time, right? Plus, it'd be interesting to see if they're taking in 1st round picks or 2nd round picks or what they're getting back in this, because there's 2 routes. There's either you take the next year's 1st round pick, if that's a possibility, and now you look at next year's draft and you're like, man, you can really control a lot with having 3 1st round picks. If you feel like Justin Fields doesn't take that next step and you have to address quarterback, what a perfect way to segue into next year's draft of, hey, what do you want? I can give you 3 1st round picks this year. And plus, whatever to get to where I need to, if need be. And I hope this isn't the case that Justin Fields doesn't work out for them, because I obviously have been on the show and I think that, it's going to be that. I think Justin Fields is their future, but you got to plan for, the failure of your own guys. And let's face it too, Ryan Poles didn't draft Justin Fields. So it's still a matter of, it's not his guy. But it'd be interesting to see like what they could get in return. But like I said, there's 2 routes. Either have that 1st round pick for next year that you're able to grab, or you're trying to get within that 30 to 50 range that we've kind of talked about over the course of this process, because they have holes. And it's just interesting. And I'm sure Q over there has pulled up what a trade package would look like over there, because he seems like he's got that look in his eye that he knows exactly what it looks like. But I'd be interested to hear if that's the case.
That is the case, Juice. So I didn't have to go far from home either, because it's the Justin Fields trade. Bears traded 20 for 11, and they also gave up a 1st rounder the next year, a 5th rounder in the same year, and then a 4th rounder the next year.
I mean, that'd be a hell of a return.
Yeah.
You move back.
I mean, that's for a quarterback, and I think quarterbacks are priced different, but still.
Yeah, do you think that dictates the negotiation though? Or do you feel like no matter what, if somebody's trading up for 20, let's say we were talking about like a team that was in the playoffs last year, but they feel like they're a piece away Like they need a left tackle or they need do you think that changes the return?
I think it changes the negotiation and the number of parties involved.
Okay.
I mean, so when the Bears traded up for Fields, Minnesota was trying to trade up for Fields, supposedly. So you had two different teams calling on the same thing, and who knows what they heard through back channels about what each other were doing, and they're bidding up against each other. And I think that plays into it more than with a position player where you're just probably not going to get the same type of bidding war.
That's fair.
Yeah, that is fair. I think especially because everybody get desperate when it comes to QB, right? Like that's just the nature of the game, and because it's the hardest position to evaluate, really, in football. And I thought it was interesting. I needed some background noise today while I was crunching numbers, and I threw on the New Heights podcast, the Kelsey brothers, and they were talking about the draft a little bit before they interviewed Sauce Gardner. It was an all Cincy boys show, and it was really interesting listening to them talk about, outside of quarterback, what positions are the hardest to evaluate. And they said offensive line and linebacker, which I thought was really interesting. And O-line, understandably, because I got into a conversation with somebody like this the other day, that it's truly a position that unless you're super familiar with football or played the position, you really don't understand like what makes a good lineman, right? Like, because they don't get the notoriety and they're not as deeply discussed on, the media outlets and things like that. Linebacker, I thought was interesting though, because maybe it's just because of scheme fit. I think that's what they explained, right? Like 4-3 versus 3-4. Is he an inside guy? Is he an outside guy? At the next level. We saw it with Brian Urlacher, who was a safety in college and eventually became obviously one of the best, Tampa 2 middle linebackers we've probably ever seen. But I thought that was just interesting. But again, it goes back just to further your point, Q, right, about the bidding war. Because quarterback is so hard to evaluate, you're going to have to take your biggest swings there. That's just the nature of the beast. The Bears did it with Justin Fields. We've seen countless. The 49ers did it with Trey Lance, and they might be trading him because they're taking calls on him. Now, they haven't said they're going to trade him, but it just goes to show how crazy the position can get. And again, there is every part of me that hopes the Panthers take Young at 1 and Richardson goes in the top 5 or 6 somehow if a team moves up like Tennessee, and then CJ Stroud's there at 9, because then I want to see the bidding war for CJ Stroud, because I think he garnishes more of a bidding war than
Absolutely.
Will Levis does. So that would be banana lands. Like if I'm Ryan Poles, I'm hoping and praying that Stroud falls and is there at 9, and all of a sudden your phone's lighting up because 5 teams are trying to move up to that spot and take them. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there, doing one of these and just going, all right, bid. What are you giving me? And what if Poles somehow manages to swipe another first next year and has 3 and maybe gets another 2nd or 3rd round pick in next year's draft? Like all of a sudden you've loaded the cupboard for the next 3 years to either A, to Juice's point, you have a failsafe, or B, you got so much ammunition to build around Justin Fields that it's unbelievable. So that's what I'm hoping for. I want CJ Stroud to fall because I just want to see the chaos.
That would be a dream, man. And I mean, the Colts' new head coach was, he was the Eagles OC, right?
Yep. Sure.
Maybe he wants to build an offense around Anthony Richardson. I mean, maybe he wants that mobility factor to really be a highlight of what they do.
Yeah.
Which is not what you're going to do with CJ Stroud, And I'm still of the camp that I'll be surprised still if Bryce Young is the pick for the Panthers. And I know that that's where everything's pointing to, and I'm probably on the wrong end of that. But it just seems like such a clear fit with Frank Reich to me that it's hard for me to see it be anything but that. But everything's pointing to Bryce Young now. So that gets really interesting at that point with the idea of the Texans not going quarterback and with Indy potentially wanting that mobility factor to really be a highlight of what they do.
Could you imagine, just purely playing devil's advocate here, if Stroud were to go number 1 and Richardson were to be the second quarterback for the board and Bryce Young was the fall?
Hey, man, Zach Wilson was the second quarterback off the board, and I thank God every day for it. So
you're right. And Trey Lance was third, and it makes me the happiest human on the face of the earth because the way things are looking right now, that it's going to be the Lawrence and Fields talk from that quarterback class, going into the future, in my opinion, just because I think those two were the most talented coming in, but people fell in love. You fell in love with what Trey Lance did at North Dakota State, and they fell in love with what, Zach Wilson brought at BYU. And I am thankful for the Jets and the 49ers every single day. Every single day. But gentlemen, we've come to about the 40-minute mark. Obviously, we've got a lot of planning to do for next week with the draft coming up. I want to turn the microphones back over to you guys really quick. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? And next time we're talking within 48 hours of the draft, and shit's gonna get real.
Yeah. There are just a lot of ways for the Bears to come out of this for winners. They are in such clear control of what they're doing right now in this draft that there are just an infinite amount of solutions to their problems as far as the draft alone goes. So just pick one of the right ones.
I like it. Keep it short and simple, right? Juice.
Yeah, I think keep it simple, stupid, right? That's the there's like 4 picks that are probably we would go through our minds and go, what the hell are we doing? That's there's 4 players like that. But no, I'm ready for it to be over. I'm ready for camp to start and OTAs, and I'm getting ready for football, man, because I'm ready for this roster to be set, all the free agency stuff to be in the past, and I just want to see Justin Fields take that leap, man. And this is obviously where you start to build that, put things around him that make sense, and let's shore up that defense and let's go at it, man, because it's that division is still for the taking too, and people go from last to playoffs so often in the NFL that I know that we're probably all sitting here like, man, we got a lot of holes. It's going to be a while, but weirder things happen in football. And if you have the right quarterback, it can take you a long way. And that's why, fingers crossed, they do. But like I said, just keep it simple. And if they have a good trade package that's out there and they feel like they can move down and still get a good player, I hope they take it, because there is a lot that comes with adding another pick either in this draft or next draft. So yeah, I'm all for it, man. I'm ready to sit with you guys and hold hands and pray to God that the Bears do the right thing next week.
100%. Yeah, I'm ready for it. I'm right there with you guys. I'm just excited for, as my name tag has said throughout the show, I'm ready for chaos. I'm ready for shit to start going down. I'm ready for that first pick that just everybody goes, whoa, and then that throws the entire course of the draft off. That is what I live for, right? People get excited off, they get the adrenaline rush for roller coasters and sports betting and things like. I get a rush off of when the draft gets turned on its head. That's what gets my blood pumping, and just that's what I'm ready for. So I'm right there with you guys. I can't wait. Next week's show is going to be great. We're going to really dive into players we like, guys that we hope the Bears take, and what they can do in the NFL, etc. Next week's show is going to be a lot of fun, and again, it'll be pretty much right on the eve of the draft. So that anticipation alone is going to be enough excitement to get people ready for what's to come. Quick reminders for everybody: Bears on Tap, one of 2 Bears podcasts here for the On Tap Sports Network. Check out our friends over at the Bears Nation podcast. They do a great job at Bears Nation Pod on Twitter. Be sure to be following us too as well at Bears on Tap on Twitter. If you're not following Q, you're making a huge mistake. He's at Butkus Stats on Twitter. I am at Loose on Tap. Juice is at Juice on Tap. Be sure to follow all of us. I'm sure we'll be posting some video content, reactions, etc. throughout the draft as well. So be sure to be following if you're not already. And we've got it all. Cubs, Sox, Bulls, Blackhawks. You know the drill. We got the whole thing here. On TapSportsNet.com, at On Tap Sports on social media. Be sure to be following with us and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Gentlemen, always a pleasure being on the microphone with you, talking football, talking Bears. 1 week away. We're almost there. And then we can start to dive in. What did they get? And what does this team start to look like as camp opens up over the course of the summer? So from myself, from Juice, and from Q, we'll see you guys next week. And bear down.
Bear down.